So, for those of you who have already looked at the obscure lighting tutorials, here's something new that expands upon that theory but allows greater flexibility. So what I'm going to do, we've got the default lighting set up at the moment, a few Wings 3Ds models and default materials, these spheres to show the background reflections, and just going to set things up pretty much as before with the other obscure lighting. So I'm turning the atmosphere off, setting the sky to black, go into the image-based lighting tab, use HDRI image. I'm going to open the Treppenhall 2 HDRI image, set the quality down, set the intensity. I'm going to set the intensity right up this time, apply to light source. I'm going to set the specularity, which is what we're going to use to work this effect. Instead of the diffuse light, we're going to use specularity, but I'll set it for 0 for now, HDRI effect to 0 for now, disable true ambience optimization, include only the background. I'm going to use this backdrop, but I'm going to blend with sky, and I'm going to use a transparency of 85. This will mean that I can use maximum intensity for the HDRI image, which means that through apply to light source I'll be able to scale up the specularity tremendously, so there'll be no shortage of specularity to drive my effects, because sometimes you can struggle for the amount of specularity, but I can still get a decent reflection by using the transparency control, hence my choice of blend with sky, which is black. So I can use the transparency to alter the level back down so it looks okay for a reflection. Light from inside, turn off cast shadows, check out of there, go into the render options and choose premium effects. I'll turn it down to 36 rays per pixel, true ambience, TA scatter correction checked, boost light checked, maximum ray depth 4. So all previous settings, and now just give it a quick render. You can see that because we're using the backdrop image, the things in the scene are picking up through the true ambience effect some fireflies from the HDRI lighting. Not a problem. So create our light source, edit it, true ambience optimization, use gel, include background, procedural, reset, but turn the diffusion off, turn the specularity up, and we've got a specular highlight there, and it's this that we can use to drive the effect now. So because it's solid, normal, so it's not letting any light through, that'll kill our fireflies, and because we've neither got specular or direct diffuse light coming from the HDRI backdrop, we won't see any effect from this. In the attributes, make sure remember to call it background and spell it correctly, and then enlarge it as fully large as it'll go to encompass the entire scene. So if you look in the attributes now, you see that it's the maximum size and it's called background. So if I render this now, I would expect to see no more fireflies, only the reflected image. Now, the beauty of using the specular is in the material. Consider now the material. We can control the spread of the highlight, so increasing the specular halo will increase the spread of this highlight. At this level then, we'll try and feed it with some specular to show you the effect working. So I've given it 100, but bear in mind with the intensity applied to light source, that'll be quite a lot of specular hitting the inside of this, so we should get some light now. It's noisy, and partly that's due to the low rays per pixel, but you've got to consider is that the specular highlights are quite small. If I modify this sphere here to the same material settings as the light source, so I'll select the two material and check out, and then change this sphere to also be called background, so it also receives the light, you can see the size of the specular halos. They're quite small. But if we select both the light source and this object and modify the material and change the specular halo so it's much larger, so set it to full, that's like the tune setting to give the cell shading effect, then it'll cover the sphere and be very even light and provide huge amounts of light. So in the image-based lighting tab, I'm going to turn the specular down, and then you can see now we've got more even light from the backdrop, probably more even, or as even as you could get from diffuse lighting, and so the noise is reduced even at this low rays per pixel. You can see that some areas are receiving a lot and others. This is going to be inverted because this is being lit from the light from inside, which is at the world's core. If we wanted to see essentially what the invisible light source was looking like on the inside, I'll just save this camera position so we can get back there. You can have a look in here and you can see masses of light. So much light we can't interpret it at this stage because we can't see in high dynamic range on the monitors. So I'll just pop the sphere back. In fact, I'll restore it. If I change its name to anything other than that, it won't receive the light, and then I can put it back to the same material by selecting them in that order. I don't want the background selected. Select the material, it'll be reflective. So this is the idea. Instead of using diffuse, use the specular. In fact, if we wanted to, we could have the two different light sources interacting in the same material or different material on different objects through the influence control. So you could choose to have different outputs, and depending how you set all the light sources that were linked into this, you could colour things in different ways through the different channels, which is getting a bit complicated, but I suppose this is an advanced video and we're just discussing this possibility, which I've only just started exploring. The other thing that it occurs to me that you could do, if you looked at the Bryce mentoring DVD, you'll know there are ways of getting the bump to act like a normal channel output, so you can actually generate colours through the bump channel, through the specular channel and anisotropic shading, and then you could use the specular light through that process to produce light coming through a material channel that's coloured from the bump. So you could get some very curious effect from that, but I won't really cover it in this video because that's sort of drifting off topic. So just to say then, this is what we're discussing. If we go to the sphere, here in the material settings we're using specularity instead of the diffuse to stimulate the effect that's working through the true ambience channel and back through the boost light. In fact, if we include anisotropy as well, that'll cause even more spread, so it'll make the light even more even, till eventually it'll get down to being very similar to a gel light. As you can see now, adding the anisotropy has caused further increase in the light levels, so in fact we don't need to supply very much specular through this channel at all. But not that little. So the multiplication here might not even be necessary. We'll try it somewhere in mid-range. No, the multiplication is necessary. It's without apply to light source. Look, no specular. So it is at this point important to be able to multiply it up, but possibly the intensity doesn't need to be that high. So I wouldn't need to use this method. I could add to sky directly, and then let's see how much light we've got through. Now it's just a matter of balancing the outputs between the multiplier and the intensity through apply to light source, having a decent reflected backdrop to work with these spheres and enough light to work on your scene. So you can see at the moment the render time's not too punishing because we're mostly dealing with diffuse objects. The intense colour can be controlled through the saturation, so if I wanted it to be greyer, then I could utilise the saturation there and have a greyer scene. Not that I minded the intense blue, I was just wanted to demonstrate the scope of that control. I think I'll increase the intensity a little bit, increase the colour a little bit. Oh, too much, you see, burned out at the top there. So since there is a strong bias to the lights, then obviously you can rotate the image round. Like I say, as shown before, if you want to get some idea of what this is going to look like, you need to turn off light from inside, and since we know oh yeah, not that control, drifting, switch to exclude, then you should be able to pick up something through the channel, but it's not showing up. Maybe, oh yeah, the difficulty is it's not getting the specular response, so I will have to provide a bit of this. So by using this approach, you can see where the predominant light source is, roughly speaking, so coming from the left there, if I can get it, Just move it around a little bit and see if demonstrate that it's going to be more or less the same for the, I had it a moment ago, specular control. There, right, so you see there's more on the left, so I'll just turn off that. Mind you, there's nothing to work with that, so I could leave that on. Light from inside, include, that'll switch it through to the inside of the background, and we should find now that the predominant light source is over to the left hand side. You can see that because we've hidden some of the main light sources, to increase the specular, something about like that. So it's saying 2 minutes. If we have a look on the render options here, we'll give it full raise per pixel, see how long that's going to take. I don't suppose there's going to be any particular advantage between one mode and another, and I'll just check to see whether having a bit of, so that's saying 34 minutes, having a bit of HDRI effect is going to slow things down much. Let's set that to 0 and let's see if it improves the render time. I believe in turning everything off that you're not really using to improve render times, but sometimes it doesn't have any effect and sometimes it does. 37 minutes, so it didn't really make any odds because there's nothing in this scene that it's pointed at that can actually receive the diffuse effect, because the light source that we're using, the gel light, is only receiving the specular light that's being driven out from the HDRI at the moment. So it's really not a very precise tutorial to a definite aim, but it's just to demonstrate that you can utilize the specular channel instead of the diffuse channel to create this obscure lighting effect just as well, and possibly it offers more scope for controls and more scope for special effects through the specular channel, because you've got the anisotropic effect, you've got colours that you can derive through bump, and you can control the size of the specular halo, which in turn will control the amount of noise by spreading or contracting the virtual light sources that you're creating on the inside of this gel light sphere. So I'll pause the video at this point and I'll let you see how this is done when it's completed, how this looks when it's completed. I wonder what that bright patch just under there is being caused by. Must be due to the reflection or something being trapped, or maybe that's got some specular on that material, I don't know. Anyway, something else to look into and investigate. Here then is the completed render. It's not the most enthralling image, I know, but as a proof of concept it does demonstrate that by utilising, we'll just go into the Skylab here, image-based lighting, specular output of the HDRI image linked through the intensity and applied to light source that's directed to the background but not through transience optimization, then this too can become a light source. And indeed, if we look at the material settings for the light source, any of these channels, except I should avoid displacement because it tends to crash and probably wouldn't contribute very much, but diffusion, ambience, specularity as shown here, metallicity through reflection can be used. I would avoid transparency because that would allow the possible interference of the HDRI backdrop by letting fireflies through come from it, and it would slow the render down. So otherwise you can consider using all these other controls in combination to create different lighting effects. So it shows it's a very powerful method. If it wasn't for the fact that I like to make sure that I get something for my reflection from the HDRI image, then you could use, instead of a radial light, gel light, you could use solid material on a sphere or some other Bryce primitive and get the effect that way, and you would see directly where the light was coming from, but you would lose the quality of render you get when using a HDRI image for reflection purposes, which works very well with metallic materials with reflective components. So that is the main reason for utilizing a gel light in combination with using those effects. So I hope that was an interesting video, and will encourage you to experiment with this lighting method.